Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha Anderson. I am a staff attorney with the National Congress of American Indians, and I will be your webinar administrator today. On behalf of NCAI, I'd like to thank you for attending this presentation on the Land Buyback Program, Understanding the Acquisition Process. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to go over some of our webinar features. First, you should see on your screen the PowerPoint for today's presentation. If during the presentation you experience any lag in slide transition, it may be a result of internet connection, so just give it a few extra seconds to update on your screen. Currently, with the exception of panelists, all audience phone lines are muted until conclusion of the presentation. But if you would like to ask a question, you can type it in the questions box on your webinar control panel. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A session and panelists will answer questions submitted through the questions box. Depending on the amount of questions, I will also try to get those to the panelists as we are going through the webinar. If you would like to ask your question over the phone, please use the raise hand option so we can unmute your phone line after the presentation. Also, our webinar software archives all questions submitted through the questions box, so if we are unable to answer or address your question, the panelists can follow up with you after the webinar has concluded. And finally, this webinar is being recorded so that we can share this presentation with you and others that are not able to attend today. Now that I've covered some of the webinar features, I'd like to pass it off to NCAI's General Counsel, John Duffy.
Thanks so much, Natasha. My name is John Duffy. I'm the General Counsel for the National Congress of American Indians, and thanks everyone for joining us today. This is a follow-up to yesterday's webinar where Iris Chrisman from the Office of Special Trustee talked about the appraisals and valuation process, and that was a really good presentation yesterday. Today, the focus is more on the acquisitions or the transactions part of the buyback program. The buyback program generally is, Congress has set aside $1.9 billion for the repurchase of fractionated interests in Indian lands as a part of the Cobell settlement. These fractionated interests have been a management problem for tribes and for the Department of Interior for many, many years, so it's really a great step forward that this program is getting off the ground. Today, Lorna Babby from the department was going to be our primary speaker. Unfortunately, she's had a situation arise. So the good news is that John McClanahan, the director of the program, is going to take her place. So we really appreciate John McClanahan stepping in today. Thanks so much, John. And then also Debbie Kobrick from the Department of Interior has more expertise in land title and records, and she's also going to join the discussion with John McClanahan. We also have on the phone John Berry, who's the chairman of the Quapaw tribe of Oklahoma, one of the tribes dealing with this program. We thought it'd be good to have a tribal perspective involved. Major Russell is an attorney who represents many of the tribes in the Northern Plains region. And I think joining her is Clark Madison today. So we've got several knowledgeable folks on the line to engage in the discussion. And we definitely want questions from everyone in the audience, so please send us your questions. We'd love to hear them. With that, I'll turn it over to John McClanahan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John, and I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to join the call and learn more about the buyback program. We look forward to these opportunities to answer questions and explain the program. These webinars are useful for that, and I do want to thank NCI for coordinating and working with us to help get the word out. I think John Dossett and I talked about this when I was in Reno at the mid-year, and thought it would be good to keep the dialogue open. And so I really do, again, appreciate working with NCAI on these webinars, and we look forward to the possibility of doing more of these in the future. Before I get started, I just wanted to say a few things about myself. I'm the program manager, as John said, for the buyback program, which has been in existence for almost a year. It was created back in December of last year, and I've been in my position since about September, so I've been with the program for about a year. I've been with the department for about 13 years now, working on trust-related issues the whole time. Some of you may have known me when I was in the solicitor's office or with the Office of Historical Trust Accounting. But anyhow, now I'm fortunate and glad to be working on this very exciting project that has a lot of promise and opportunity for making tribal lands the best that they can be. So it's a really great position to have, and I look forward to working with everybody that's on the phone and getting this job done. Let me also just comment really quickly on the shutdown. The buyback program is one of the few fortunate programs that aren't affected as much by the shutdown. We have a mandatory appropriation that comes out of the Cobell settlement, and so that fund is basically exempt from the shutdown right now. That's not to say, however, that we won't have effects that aren't affected by the shutdown. We've got a number of key people within the department that are on furlough right now that we work with. For example, Darrell Account is somebody that we've been working quite a bit with on the buyback program, especially in the acquisition process, and our partners in the Office of Special Trustees. Some of those folks are also on furlough in the solicitor's office. So we're keeping progress going, but we do have some folks that we do need to deal with that we can't right now. But anyhow, I'm glad to be here, and with that, let me just go to the first slide. The buyback program, in the big sense, is a major part of the Cobell settlement. There are three parts of that Cobell settlement. One was the payments to the account holders for historical accounting and trust management issues, the so-called Stage 1 and Stage 2 payments. The second part of the Cobell settlement involves the Secretary's Trust Reform Commission, which has been meeting over the last year or so, and will have recommendations in the near future. And then the third component is the land consolidation component. Again, that's the $1.9 billion that was made available to the department to buy back fractional interest in land. And we've got until November 2022 to utilize that funding. Not all of the reservations or locations across the country have these fractional interests. As indicated here, there's about 150 locations with tracts of land that have more than one owner. So those are the locations that we'll be focusing on. On the website, we have a table that has a list of those 150 locations and a number of different statistics. If you need to identify your location, you can look to our website, and they're listed there. As we have talked in previous settings, a major point of the program is that it's voluntary. So when we're seeking to purchase fractional interests from individuals, it's up to them. It's their decision as to whether they want to sell their land. We're not forcing sales. So that's a major premise of the program. As far as kind of the overall status of where we're at now, our goal remains to be purchases by this December. We are working with a number of different locations to get the program going. We've got cooperative agreement discussions and applications going on right now with a number of tribes. And as I talked about in Reno, if you were there, or you may have seen a press release back in June, we are using a number of different factors to guide where we go with the program initially. And those include the severity of fractionation. That's a very important one. We also are looking at a balance in the program. We want to make sure that we go to different geographic locations across the country. And we're also looking at tribal readiness. Like I said, we're working with a number of tribes right now and can really use their help in a number of areas. And so when the tribes are ready, that's another important factor for us because we do need their involvement. Today, as John said, we want to focus on the acquisition phase, and so why don't we turn to the next slide and get into that here in a minute. Basically, though, I think we want to just take a pause here and ask ourselves, why is land consolidation so important? Why are we doing this? And I think a lot of folks will realize that with so many owners, some of these tracts have hundreds and sometimes thousands of owners. It's very difficult to get all those owners together to make a productive use of the land. And so by buying these interests and transferring those interests immediately to the tribe, we're making the land tenure situation a lot more effective. There'll be fewer owners to work with and try to get approvals when it comes to leasing the land or doing a right-of-way or conserving the land. So by putting the lands into the hands of the tribes, we're able to make the communities more productive. I'm sure a lot of folks have also seen the checkerboarded nature of many reservations, and by consolidating these interests, we can improve tribes' ability to be sovereigns over the reservation by making those lands stronger. And so we're also looking at the income that's coming off the land. When you take a tract and you divide up, let's say, $1,000 lease payment among 1,000 owners, that spreads the money pretty thinly, so each of those owners is not really receiving that much. So the income that's coming off the land, to the extent it is, will now, through this program, be concentrated and more effective in the hands of the tribe. So those are just some of the reasons why the program is important. With land acquisition, on the next slide, you can see that it's one of four of the major steps involved in the program. At its highest level, the land acquisition step is really the title function. This is where we're processing the deeds and posting the payments for the owners. It's somewhat critical, I think, to point out that the other steps in the process, especially outreach, are going to be instrumental in actually getting us to this land acquisition stage. Essentially, if we don't do a good job together working with the tribal leaders and the owners and getting the word out, we won't have deeds to process or payments to process, because, again, this program is entirely voluntary. And so we really need to do a good job at identifying the questions that the owners have and making sure that we answer those questions so the owners feel informed and equipped to make a decision about whether they want to sell our land. And so I can't stress enough how important that outreach phase is. We want to make sure that folks know about the program, know when the offers are coming, know what to do when they get the offers. So we're really looking for the help and support of the tribes in talking about the program and why it may make sense for a particular person to sell. So that's an important message that I hope everybody can convey is the importance of outreach and our dedication to making sure that the owners' questions are answered in that outreach phase. So let's move next to the steps of the acquisition phase. As some of you may have heard from Iris Chrisman yesterday, the Office of Appraisal Services has got to first value the land before we can make an offer to an individual. So once we get the value from the appraisers, that value is loaded into a system, the land title system, also known as TAMS, or the Trust Asset Accounting Management System. And that's the system that will basically create the offers that can be then mailed to the landowners. So getting those values in the system is very important and will enable the offers to show not only what the amount of the land is, but also the date that it was valued. And we'll see the actual documents here in a few minutes that will indicate how the appraisal information shows up for the owners. As I said before, the outreach will occur before the offers are received by the owners, but also after the offers are sent out. So there's both pre- and post-offer outreach that will happen, again, to make sure that the owners understand the program and their questions are answered. The next step is for the sellers to actually review the documents and if they're interested in selling, return those offers back to the department. There'll be a centralized location that will receive those offers and scan them into the TAM system so that the title can be approved by the BIA. And once that approval process occurs, there's a nightly routine essentially that runs within Interior to post payments to the trust fund system. So we'll post the payments directly to IM accounts after the sales have been approved. And then the owners will get an acknowledgement letter through the mail that basically indicates that the interest had been sold and that payment was posted. One other step that's not indicated here, but I wanted to mention, is there's an account statement that also goes out to the owners, and that will reflect the transaction as well. So that's another, I guess, communication with the account holders about the sale. Are there any questions so far?
Yes.
I've got one now, Barry. Is it possible for the landowner to waive the appraisal?
To waive the appraisal?
Yes, sir.
In the past, John, I believe there had been a process in the existing Indian Land Consolidation project where an owner could waive the appraisal in the sense that if the value had been determined a long time ago, let's say more than a year, I believe the practice had been was to get an acknowledgement or some kind of a waiver from that owner to recognize that that value had been done some time ago. We haven't really talked a whole lot about how that might work or if it needs to work for this program. Our general approach is, as Iris probably explained yesterday, is to make an appraisal first and get that value to the owners. And part of the reason for that is that the program is voluntary and the amount that will be established is really based on the appraisal. And so we need that appraisal in order to determine what the offer amount needs to be for the actual conveyance.
Well, my kind of question sort of relates to if you have an extremely small fractionated interest and there's going to be that minimum payment, it doesn't seem like an appraisal would be necessary if it's an extremely fractionated piece of land that's not going to exceed the $70 minimum.
Yeah, the requirement that we have in the settlement is a requirement that refers back to the Indian Land Consolidation Act, which is to offer fair market value. And fair market value we've defined as requiring an appraisal. And so if it's a really tiny fractional interest with a low value, it could be that interest is located on a tract of land that can be captured through mass appraisal efforts anyhow, and so it may not be an issue in many of the locations where we'll be going. At the beginning, I could have mentioned that 90% of the fractional interest that we will be able to purchase through this program are located in a pretty small number of the 150 locations. And in many of those large land-based locations, mass appraisal methods will work, and so we'll be able to get values for most of the lands pretty quickly. And so I'm hoping that it won't really be too much of an issue for us, that we really do have to comply with the settlement's requirement to offer fair market value.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So Debbie Kobrick was going to focus in on these next couple of slides about the module, so I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to do that now.
Thank you.
We could go to slide number 6. Of course, with this new program, we're looking to be able to do enhancements to TAMS, the current title system, in order to generate offers for the landowners. With the enhancements that are being done to TAMS, we are working to have a one-step offer process in which we're utilizing the current ownership information in TAMS. The new module will also allow us to generate reservation-wide offer packages for all of the owners instead of one at a time. As the process is also being standardized and automated so that we eliminate manual activities and help expedite the time to process offer packages that are returned by the willing sellers. We also have an approval function, as John mentioned earlier, in which once the function has been approved, then we will have an automated payment transferred for deposit into that IIM account and title transferred to the tribe. Another advantage of the TAMS module is all the documents that are generated for the offer to purchase package are stored electronically in TAMS, as well as the paperwork that's returned by the landowner wishing to sell their interest. So that is another feature that we'll have with the TAMS enhancement, is managing all the records electronically. We also have the ability to generate various data from TAMS for the tribe to use in helping to make decisions about which tracts they want to make priorities for purchasing by the buyback program. And lastly, also to have the capability to generate tract maps showing the location of the fractional interest for the landowners. So when they're reviewing their package, they will be able to see where their tracts reside when trying to make decisions of is this a particular interest they want to sell. Next slide, please.
Before we go to the next slide, I have a question from a participant. What if ownership data in TAAMS is not accurate? Will DOI certify title?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
What if ownership data in the TAAMS is not accurate? Will DOI certify title?
John, did you want to respond to that one?
I can. If you want to, Debbie, that'd be fine as well. I would basically say that the system, the TAMS title system, is the system of record for the titles. And so we have been improving the quality of that system for many years through various different efforts, the BIA in particular. But one of the things that the buyback program has been doing to ensure that the information or the titles that we'll be utilizing for the buyback program are accurate is to improve the mapping information that exists. And so we've been working with the Bureau of Land Management to map the tracts of land, and there are a number of different tests that are embodied within that work, and so we're able to basically do some checks to make sure that, for example, you have if you have a surface tract, that surface tract should not overlap with a B tract or a bulk tract, one that has both a surface and a subsurface. So we've been doing some work to check on those kinds of things. But again, for the most part, the system is the system of records and has gone through a number of improvements. And when we send out an offer, it's based on the status of the title, the official record as determined by BIA.
Okay, I have another question, if that's all right. What access will tribes have to TAMS during LBBP acquisition process?
What we've been talking with tribes about is the question of what information is necessary to support the program or partner with the program to implement the program. And we feel that by focusing on what is the information that's necessary, there may be a number of different ways to get tribes that information. It's not necessarily access to TAMS itself. So we've got some mapping data that we've developed and shared with a number of tribes, and we'll be sharing with others in the future. And we've also developed some data extracts from TAMS that contain information that will be helpful to tribes in carrying out the program with us. And so those are a couple of things that we've been putting together to make sure that the tribes are equipped to help us, because we agree that it's important for the tribes to have the right information out of TAMS or elsewhere to make sure that they can help us make the program a success.
Okay. And I have one other question for the panelists. Where the tribe does not have ownership in an allotment and there is a willing seller, will this project help to move those applications along?
If I understand correctly, I think I would say that you don't have to have a tribe in ownership of a tract in order for us to be able to purchase the interest. In other words, if there's a tract of land with two owners and they're both individuals, neither one are a tribe, we can buy from both those folks if both are interested and willing in selling, or if only one is interested in selling, we can purchase just from the one person. We don't have to have a tribe in ownership of a tract right now in order to make a purchase on that tract.
John, this is Majel. Can we go back to, I guess before we got into these questions, when we were talking about the TAMS data or the correctness of TAMS title system? What if you have a landowner who has issue with that TAMS title information, or they're thinking there's an error or there's a problem, or maybe there's a tract they think should be included that's missing? How will you deal with that?
Well, I guess if there are instances where somebody has a question, then we want to hear about those. But right now, without knowing what those particular examples are, it's kind of hard to speculate about that.
I guess I'm wondering, is there going to be a process? Like if somebody receives their offer in the mail and it has a list of all the interests that they own, and they believe that there's an error, is there going to be a process to deal with that? And I'm wondering, would that just be considered an appeal, which I know you're not wanting to handle appeals, but is there going to be a process where someone can say, I think there's a problem or there's an inaccuracy with the title that you've listed here of my interest? And I bring that up because, amazingly, we have just been dealing with some title problems for some landowners, which were highly unexpected, where we have actual incorrect title in the system, and we're kind of confused about how that's all going to play out with the program.
Well, Majel, if somebody gets an offer and they have a question or a concern or believe there's some inaccuracy in that, yes, we would encourage them to call the call center number and bring that to our attention. So we would definitely want to hear about that. And so that would probably be the first step for an owner who has a question, is to call that toll-free call center number, and we can try to deal with it there. And if we can't deal with it there, then we can have BIA acquisition staff potentially follow up on the question as well.
Okay.
And one thing I guess I should mention, Majel, you in your question referred to, I think, folks having a list of all the tracts that they own in the offer, and I just wanted to clarify that it might not be that way.
Right.
In other words, the offers that we send out are going to be for the tracts that we have a fair market value on, where an appraisal is basically done. So it's entirely possible that somebody could get an offer, and let's say they have fractional interest in 10 tracts. Well, it may be that only 8 of those tracts actually have an appraisal that's current, and so the offer would really just list those 8 tracts that we're making an offer of purchase on.
Okay, that's helpful. Then maybe now's a good time to ask the question, because I agree. I understand that when you send out the offer to a landowner that it'll be those tracts that have been appraised, but then it's also going to be those tracts that DOI has designated purchasable. And we've been wanting to have some clarification about what tracts are purchasable versus tracts that are non-purchasable. And as you know, John, we have been looking at data for some tribes and see a large number of tracts that have been omitted as non-purchasable tracts. And we thought maybe it'd be helpful for an explanation on the difference between purchasable and non-purchasable tracts.
Sure. So a purchasable tract, and this is described in the appendix to the plan on our website that we put out back in December. It's Appendix B. There's a page that is a narrative explanation of the listing of the locations on those statistics. So what I'm talking about will come partly from that. And so for purchasable, it's basically a tract of land that has more than one owner. And it also needs to be a tract where there's a tribe with jurisdiction over the land. And so that's the basic definition of what a purchasable tract is. A non-purchasable tract includes tracts that are owned only by a tribe. That would not be a purchasable tract because, again, it doesn't have a multiple ownership situation. Non-purchasable tract would also include a life estate interest. So we're not including a tract that only has life estates. So those are, a couple of ways to understand what is purchasable and not purchasable. And I think, the other thing that I would encourage is if there are questions, because I know some tribes have, like you said, Majel, been looking at the data that they have and totaling up tracts, and it may be different than what we have stated on that Appendix B in the plan, which we actually have updated more recently. It's on our website with more current TAMS data, that we just have a conversation and try to resolve what those what accounts for the difference in the numbers. It could be that a tribe is using a certain set of TAMS data that's a different date than what we're using, because there is some dynamism, I guess, in the data. There is still fractionation occurring from day to day, and so that could be part of the discrepancy. It's just the time, the data sets that each folks are using. But again, I would just encourage for us to have conversations where there are perceived differences, and so far I think we've had some success in explaining those.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. What is the purchase offer process? This flow chart here, the steps that a landowner would take whenever they receive their offer package in the mail, review the package, take a look at what interests are being offered to purchase, and decide if they want to sell any. And if they do, they will sign and return. If there's any questions while they're looking at their offer packet, they can call the Call Beneficiary Center or attend any of the number of local buyback outreach sessions that will be made available as the buyback program is rolled out to the various reservations. Right now, they have 45 days to review and return the offer back in the mail. Once that's received in at the acquisition center, it will be scanned into TAMS, reviewed for completeness, and if everything is in order for the package that came back in, the transaction will be approved, and at that time, the purchase amount will be transferred to the IIM account and title transfer to the tribe, and lastly, an acknowledgement letter out to the landowner letting them know the transaction has been completed and the total dollar amount that has been deposited to their account.
Oh, I have a question, and I didn't see anything that deals with 25 U.S.C. 2216, which is the right of a co-owner to match any offer to purchase a fractionated tract or purchase an interest. And I know that when we had consultation here in Billings, there was a lengthy discussion about how to accommodate the law that allows a co-owner to match any offer to buy an interest in a tract that landowner may own. And I didn't see that anywhere, and I'm wondering, how are you going to accommodate a landowner who may want to buy that interest out before the department does, and then conveys that interest to the tribe? And I guess for an example, you would say, maybe like myself, I own a tract of land with 2 other people, and I'm thinking that I would like the opportunity maybe to purchase out one of my co-owners before they sell that interest to the department for conveyance to the tribe. And the law allows that at 25 U.S.C. 2216, so I'm wondering how that's going to be addressed here. And I know that in the consultation in Billings that there was discussion about some time frames to allow a landowner to receive the data and try to raise financing, but I see nothing about that here in this presentation.
Majel, this is John. In your scenario, I think I understood you to say that you were talking about an owner buying directly from another co-owner, and that's something that can still go on. We're not affecting that ability. I think the co-owner issue that we talked about in Billings and elsewhere, it has been the issue of when the department makes an offer to purchase, then the co-owners can basically put up that amount of money if they're interested in buying, and that's something that we're intending to accommodate, and can put out some, and are intending to put out some more information about how that can work.
Right, and that's what I'm asking about, that second scenario, because I think 2216 allows a co-owner to match any offer that's made by the department. And so, that's what I was asking, is how are we going to do that, and how will you accommodate that if there are co-owners that want to match the offer that you're making for an interest?
I guess this is John. I mean, one thought is that I think generally all the owners in a tract are going to get the same offer at the same time, more than likely, right? That they would, perhaps that notice could also let the landowners know that if they want to invoke their right of first refusal, that they need to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, John. Like you said, one way to do it is just simply add language that lets the owners know that because they're getting an offer, there are likely to be other folks that are getting that too on that same track. In this particular set of slides, we don't have a couple of the documents that I think may go into that. And Debbie, I don't know if you have any of those handy, but I think there's an instruction sheet that may essentially go into what John was just suggesting. But overall, Major, we're aware of that issue and have been putting together some information that we'll make available so that it's clear how we're going to accommodate that particular provision.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. And John, I'll let you pick me up here.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. So this slide has just a number of different key or important concepts about the purchase offers. The first one is to hit on the point that we have a limited time for the program. As I indicated when I started out, the settlement gives the department basically 10 years. The fund is available for 10 years to the department, and that started upon final approval of the settlement. So that means we've got until 22 to utilize the fund. And because we don't have all the time in the world, we've got to impart some sense of urgency at each location that we make purchases at, so the owners know that there's a definite deadline to respond. One of the things that we heard pretty clearly through the consultation sessions that we've had on that plan from December is that we need to go to more than just a handful of the locations with fractional interest. Again, that was a pretty common concern, and if we're going to be able to do that, we need to go from location to location pretty quickly, and so the offers will have a deadline for the response to be made in order to help us achieve that goal of making offers at as many of the 150 locations as possible. These deeds that owners will be asked to fill out if they're interested in selling need to be notarized. We are intending to have notaries available at outreach events that we're going to be doing once the offers are out there in the hands of the owners. We're also working with tribes to have notary capabilities as well to help facilitate the closing of the transactions. The third point is something that we also heard during our consultation sessions and wanted to act on, and that is the idea of some amount of money that would be included in the offer. I think there are a number of different ways to characterize this. Some folks talked about it as a minimum payment or an incentive payment. We're basically referring it the concept as a base payment. And it's really in recognition of the fact that the owners are going to be taking time out of their day to look at these offers. They may be traveling a far distance to get questions answered. They may incur a charge for a notary, and so we decided that we would add $75 to the offers that we make in recognition of the time that the owners will be spending on reviewing these transactions. I want to emphasize it's a $75 per offer amount. So if you, just as an example, own fractional interest at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, you will likely get an offer for those interests. And let's say your interests are only worth $10. Well, we'll give you $10 plus $75 as the offer for your land. If you also own at Rosebud and you get a second offer for your interest at Rosebud, you'll get another $75 if you decide to sell. And so that's just an example to help illustrate that it's per offer, not per interest or per tract or anything like that. But again, that's something that we heard from tribes about during our consultation sessions, and I'm pretty pleased that we were able to address that. It took a fair amount of time working with folks in the department to make that happen, but again, I think it's pretty responsive to the comments we got. Another key concept for the offers is that we have been promoting or making it known that the call center that has existed at Interior for a number of years will be available for a lot of the owners that have questions to call. This call center has got capacity that we've added recently to make sure that we have enough operators to answer the questions, and we've been working over the last couple of months to develop frequently asked questions and answered, and so we're looking to the call center as an important first line of information or resources for the owners to have their questions answered, again, at pretty much a good amount of time during any given week.
John, I have a question. So we're looking at when you go to a specific reservation or location and you send out these offers to the landowners, and then they have 45 days to respond, and then that's the time frame. Are we looking at just one round of offers per reservation, or is there going to be a scenario where maybe we determine it might be best to run a second round? I guess that's the first question, and then the second part of that question would be then what is the shelf life of the appraisal? Yesterday I heard Iris say that she thought it was going to be at 9 months, but anyway, those are kind of two related questions.
Sure. Major, I think there's some flexibility that we can work with when it comes to sending one offer or a couple offers. You might call that a wave, I guess. And we're prepared and interested in working with each location to figure out what works best. And I think in some situations you might want to send out one group of offers and see what the response rate is, and then be prepared to send out a second and perhaps a third. But I think, for the most part, we'd want to minimize the number of different waves of offers. But it may, in other situations, make sense to just send out one round of offers if it's a less fractionated location and there's been a fair amount of work by a tribe to determine the level of interest in the owners that want to sell. You may have a better sense at a place like that about whether to send out just one wave of offers or multiple. So basically, we just kind of want to tailor it based on discussions with each tribe. As to the issue of how long appraisals are valid, we want to make sure that there's a recognition that the values can change, and we want to communicate to the owners that they need to understand that the date that the valuation was complete is important to realize, and to ask themselves if they think that any of the circumstances have changed since that appraisal was done. As Iris indicated yesterday, the department's likely to identify a time period where we will proactively assess whether a particular appraisal is valid or not. So it may be up to 9 months, where we would basically look and see, has the market changed in this particular area. If the market has not changed, then we would have the ability to still utilize the appraisal, and it may not really have a shelf life in that sense, but we just need to be vigilant here in checking to make sure that we are cognizant of market changes and check from time to time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk next about what's in the purchase offer package. We do have a couple of these documents here that we'll look at. We have the deed and the inventory that are the next couple of slides. But the cover letter and instructions will be an important part of what the owner receives. That will describe the steps that the owner needs to take in order to sell their land. That will have a number of different places that an owner can go if they have questions. Again, the main example is the call center. The deed is the legal instrument that conveys the land from the owner to the department to be held in trust for the tribe. And the Exhibit A, that's the legal description basically that goes along with the deed. And we'll look at that here in a minute, but that's the document that allows the owners to see what fractional interest the department is offering to buy, how much the value is for those, and so on. We'll look at that in a minute. And then the fourth item we have here is a map. And so each of the offer packets will have a map that depicts for the owner the location of the tracts where the fractional interests are that we're seeking to purchase, and that will help the owner evaluate the offer as well. So let's turn to the document that we have here. This is a sample of the deed that we'll be using, and I just wanted to point out here in the second paragraph, this is kind of the key operative language. This is where the grantor, the owner, is conveying their interest to the department to be held in trust for the tribe with jurisdiction. So this is really the essence of what we're doing in the buyback program is purchasing these interests from the owners. They're conveying those, again, to be held for the tribe in trust right away. And it says they're conveying the interests that are described on the attachment. So when they sign their name to this and it's acknowledged or sealed by a notary, that is the legal document that conveys the interest. So let's move to the Exhibit A, or the Purchasable Interest Inventory. This form has been in development for a number of months. Daryl LeCount has talked in previous settings about the efforts we've pursued to try to make this as understandable as possible. Oftentimes the forms that have been used in the past have been more centered on the government employees and what they needed to have for doing their work, but not perhaps so much for the owners. And so we've tried to clean these up and simplify them. But here you have the document that owners will fill out in order to indicate which tracts or interests, I should say, that they're interested in selling. And so one option is they can fill out the bubble, the first one that says sell all the tracts, or they can just fill out a couple of the lines if they're only interested in selling some and not all of their fractional interests. Yeah.
This is Majel again, and I think I've talked about this before, but do you think it might be possible at this late date to add another column of information and that I think would be really helpful is the income stream for each particular tract? And I know that that's an easy report to generate from OST, is basically the revenue stream for a tract. And so that a landowner would be able to tell that this particular interest I own only made so much or made so much or whatever the revenue that they have received over the years, I think is a fair piece of information for the landowner to have to make this assessment on whether or not to sell.
Major, I appreciate you mentioning that. I know you've talked about that before, and I think that does have some merit. And we have had some consideration or investigation of that, and are looking to do that at some point in the future. We're trying to figure out how to fit that onto this, and it may be that the initial offers that go out won't have that, but I think you have, again, a good point there. So we're looking to find a way to get that on there if possible. Let me just explain a couple of the columns or rows here. We haven't talked a lot about the scholarship component of the buyback program, but the second to last column that says matching scholarship contribution is an indication of that, and so just let me explain a little bit about that. Basically, under the settlement agreement, there's an incentive established for the owners so that they know each time they sell a fractional interest, there will be a contribution made to a scholarship fund, and that scholarship fund will be managed separately. It's not managed by the department, but the department does make the contributions to that fund. And so that amount of the matching contribution is determined by the terms of the settlement, and it's basically a graduated scale based on the value of the fractional interest that an owner is selling. Up to $60 million will be contributed by the department to the scholarship fund, and again, those contributions don't come from the proceeds that go to the owner. It's not a deduction to the owner. It's a separate payment or contribution the department makes. It does come from the $1.9 billion fund, but it's not something that the owner pays. It's something that comes from the department. The other key field to point out is the appraisal date is something that will appear inventory here so that the owners can determine when that value was established. One other thing I wanted to point out, you can see that there's a barcode indicated on the bottom of the document. That barcode is something that enables the processing to happen pretty quickly. So when this document is returned back to the department, it's scanned in, and the scanner will read that barcode and pre-populate a number of the different points of data that will go to the approval process and posting of payment. So we've accelerated the process here by using those types of technologies to streamline the process. Unless there's any questions on the inventory or the deed, let's move on to the next couple slides here. The staffing of the acquisition effort is within the BIA. The BIA's got staff in Billings and Aberdeen and Minneapolis. And those folks are dedicated to basically two areas. One is the processing of the titles and the approval of the transaction so that the payments can be posted. And then the other main function of the staff will be outreach. There'll be a staff that will go out and talk to the owners and answer their questions both before the offers are sent out and also once the offers are in the hands of the owners. They'll do events and answer questions and help facilitate the close of sales as well. In the future, there may be additional staff in other locations on an as-needed basis. We've identified the Southwest region as one possible location for more staff to be located. We recognize that we're going to learn a lot and we need to be flexible. Right now, we've got about 10 staff within BIA, but we can add to that if necessary, if we find that's not adequate to handle the transactions. But by automating, like Debbie was talking about earlier, a lot of these processes, we think we've made things a lot more efficient than it has been in the past, and we'll be able to do things pretty efficiently. Next slide. We've made a major point over the last number of months of stressing the importance of tribal involvement, and that falls in a number of different areas. One of the things that we definitely want to hear from tribes about is where are they interested in acquisitions occurring. We recognize that the tribes are very involved in the management and stewardship of their reservation lands, and have probably got a much better sense than we do on where the acquisitions ought to occur. And so we're very interested in learning what the acquisition priorities are for tribes so that we're responsive to what the local knowledge is about the land. Another key area, as I talked about before, is outreach. The tribes are going to have a major role in discussing the program and why it's beneficial and how it can help the particular community. And so we're looking in a major way for the tribal leaders and their land staff to be involved in outreach. A number of the owners are going to be located right there on the reservation, and there's likely to be existing land consolidation programs that can help with outreach, and so we want to rely on those and get the benefit of the expertise that the tribes have in doing outreach. Cooperative agreements are the basic method for getting tribal involvement if it requires the provision of financial assistance to the tribe. It's an arrangement that's somewhat unique from what some tribes are used to, in the sense that it's not a 638 contract. The Indian Land Consolidation Act specifically says that we can enter into agreements, but those agreements aren't subject to the Self-Determination Act provisions. And so that's a difference I just wanted to point out. But it shouldn't hold us up in the sense that we have a mechanism for getting tribal involvement and, again, providing part of the administrative funds that we have to implement the program to the tribes to get their help. So we've got a lot of information on the website about cooperative agreements, and we also have a lot of other information that we've put up there in the last month or so that is more focused on the landowners. There's a page for both tribes and landowners on the website, so that if you have particular questions, you can go to those places to hopefully find answers. On the cooperative agreements, the application process is described there, and the sample documents are there. I know in working with a number of the tribes so far, there's been questions and some frustration about those documents, and we're continually trying to make things more clear and simple. There are some standard federal forms that we've been using, and we're trying to get those annotated and explained to reduce any frustration or confusion that's out there. We take the cooperative agreement process pretty seriously. I have said a number of different times that our third hire at the program was a cooperative agreement specialist, and that was intentional so that we could get the systems and processes set up so that we could get these agreements going as quickly as possible. So hopefully by looking at the website, you'll be able to, if you're a tribal leader or tribal staff, filling one of those out, get your questions answered. But if not, we've got folks that are able to talk to you on the phone or through email to get things going. We have 3 tribal advisors that we've brought on board in the last month or so that are dedicated to working with tribes, and they can help you through the process along with the cooperative agreement specialist. And those contacts are on the next couple of slides. I should probably kind of spend a minute just talking about the different offices and people that are involved in the program, because it may be confusing to folks when there are so many different individuals identified. On this slide here, you can see that Jody Camrood and Lorna Babby, they're in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they're focused on the acquisition phase of the program. And like I said just a few minutes ago, that really involves the processing of the titles, the creation of the offers, the mailing of those, answering questions about those, and then getting the payment information over to the trust fund system. That's their main job, as well as doing outreach with the landowners. That's the main function that VIA component will fulfill. The Office of Appraisal Services, that's Iris Chrisman. They're focused on doing the appraisal work, and so that's their pretty much sole duty is to get those values established so we can make the offers. The tribal relations team that you see here on this slide, the role of those folks is to work one-on-one with the tribes and their representatives to facilitate the cooperative agreement process, to answer the questions that the tribes have. So they're really there to focus on the tribal leader issues and getting the program going in a particular location. Within the department, we've also got the Office of Mineral Evaluation. They're focused on looking at the subsurface ownership to see if there's any valuable mineral estates. Iris probably explained some of that yesterday, but that's another office within Interior that's helping out. The Bureau of Land Management, as I indicated earlier, is also helping by improving the mapping data, the survey data that they have. And then within the Office of the Secretary, the Program Management Office, that's my office, and that's where the tribal relations folks are. So that's a high-level summary of the different offices that are tribes are another key partner in the effort, and so, like I said, we'll be working with tribes to implement the program through cooperative agreements, and owners are another important group of folks that are part of the team, really, in making this overall program a success. So with that, I think that's most of the presentation. We can see if there's some additional questions that we can answer.
Yes, there are several. Have any cooperative agreements been approved? When, who, or where?
We have got applications from a number of tribes, and we haven't got any announcements on that yet, but there's a lot of progress that's made with those tribes, and I'm looking very enthusiastically about possibly an announcement in the near future on one or more.
John, who would approve those cooperative agreements? Who will the signatory be, and what is the approval process?
I'm the signatory for the department, and the approval process involves having subject matter experts or technical folks that might be involved working with tribes on reviewing their applications and coming up with scopes of work. So, for example, if a tribe is interested in helping out with the outreach function, then we will involve the BIA outreach team in reviewing that application. If it's a tribe that's interested in doing valuation work, we will work with Iris, Crispin, but ultimately they are reviewing it so that I have the ability to sign off on those. I'm the signatory for the cooperative agreement.
I have another question. If there are rights-of-way and trespass issues, will I be compensated even if I offer to sell my interest?
I don't know what the answer is to that right offhand, or else I shouldn't. I kind of know, and I shouldn't say that I've made sure. Yes, I'm going to have to think about that one, and we can get an answer out there about that.
Well, I guess a question that is related to that is tracts that have encumbrances are not omitted from the program. You're still going to buy tracts that have, say, leases, rights-of-ways of various kinds and so forth. Would that be correct?
Right. I think that's a more straightforward question. If there's an existing lease on a tract of land where we purchase fractional interest, that lease is still valid. The purchase doesn't extinguish that lease. I guess the question before was a little more complicated in the sense if there's some kind of legal claims or something. I don't know that I think that just involves another dimension that we need to think about and have the right answer. But Major, as you say, the program will purchase on tracts that are subject to a right-of-way or some other encumbrance.
I have another question. May the fund be utilized to secure parcels that are in probate without Native American heirs?
We have said in our plan that we're open to discussing with particular tribes that are interested in the purchase at probate option, and so that's how we're handling it, is on a tribe-by-tribe basis. Some tribes are interested in purchase at probate, and others are not. So we'll just look at that again with each tribe. We have the authority to purchase at probate. So, yeah, that's about it.
Can undivided fee interest be purchased?
Undivided fee interest. No, they cannot be purchased. The program is only purchasing fractional interest in trust or restricted land.
John, I have a question about indirect cost. We've been, as you know, working hard to try to develop a very comprehensive statement of work for several tribes on, first of all, the outreach component. And I think that it's a daunting task, because when a tribe goes into 638 or contract or compact an existing program, the parameters of that program are developed. The tasks, the objectives, the costs, the budget are somewhat developed, and then the tribe steps in, and there's a format or a template that they're going to have to work with, and they develop a proposal and negotiate. And obviously this is not in that realm, but the other part of it is there is no established program. There are no parameters. There's not a, I guess, any guidance on the number of staff, any guidance on how these tasks will be performed. And so tribes are trying to build from the bottom up something that's acceptable to various people, and it's a very daunting task. And so we're trying to work through that, as you know, and put something together that I guess is measurable and that is going to be approved by the different subject matter experts. But one question we've had and we haven't gotten an answer to is, will there be indirect costs available? And I bring that up because some tribes have said we want all the employees working in the buyback program to be contract employees. And if they're contract employees, we don't have to do all the payroll deduction and so forth, taxes. And in that case, maybe indirect costs is not as critical or shouldn't be at a higher level. In other circumstances, the tribes are wanting these employees that may come on for outreach or other tasks in the cooperative agreement to be employees. And if that's the case, then they're going to be running payroll and accounting, they're going to be running all of the funds and management through their existing infrastructure, their financial infrastructure. And in those situations, they do want indirect cost. And we haven't been able to get a good response on whether or not there's indirect cost involved or going to be allowed or not. That was a mouthful.
Major, we're looking at a uniform policy that would apply both internally and externally with regard to indirect costs, and I hope to have that out in the very near future. I recognize that's something that we have been talking with tribes about on a one-on-one basis, and we need to get something out there about that. So we're seeking to do that, and we'll hopefully clear up the types of questions that you have in your question there on that.
Okay, thank you.
I have one other question. It seems that the Albuquerque Acquisition Center has become optional. Any reason for the shift from the previous position?
I think the staffing is really driven in many ways by where the applicants were located. And so we went into the process knowing that we had to be flexible given where the candidates were. We also recognize that there is a lot of fractional interest in the Rocky Mountain and the Great Plains area, and so those locations are pretty important. But I think, as I indicated and as the slide says, there's still the possibility of having staff at other locations as well as we move forward with the program. So we'll need to remain flexible to staff where it's needed.
Okay. I have another question from the audience. Does the DOI's analysis and approval for a cooperative agreement depend on the amount of work performed by the tribe in the proposal? For approval of the CA, is it more favorable if the tribe proposals do more?
Not necessarily. I think there's going to be a lot of variation from location to location about what makes the most sense, and we really are looking to have discussions with each tribe about what they're interested in doing, what they're capable of doing. So it's hard to make any general statements about it. We really want to tailor the work to each location given the uniqueness that we're likely to find. There are some things like the acquisition process that we've talked about today that really lend themselves to highly centralized and automated processing, and so appraisals in some cases may fall into that category. There's mass appraisal systems that the department has developed that can be applied at a number of different locations. It may be that certain locations appraisal work has already occurred in the past, and so it may make sense if that's been done by a tribe to build on that, or if it's been done by Interior to build on that. So it really depends on each location's circumstances.
Hey, John, this is Clark. I've got a question. Maybe Debbie could answer this. Has the new TAMS buyback module been completed and tested?
I can answer that, Clark. It has. It's under development right now, and there is testing that will occur in the very near future, but that final testing has not occurred yet.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Do we have any more questions?
I have one more. On this part for the regarding the deed, is the landowner going to be able to keep a mineral interest if they wanted to?
If they want to keep a mineral interest, then they just need to not sell the fractional interest. We're not intending to create more fractionation by splitting a state. So if the owner has interest in a tract of land where they own both the surface and the subsurface, and they want to keep the subsurface, then they just decide not to sell the whole thing, because again, we're not wanting to split out estates.
John, maybe a related question is, what about where the estates have been severed many years ago, perhaps by the original owner, and the person might only own the subsurface? Will you be purchasing fractionated subsurface interest?
Yeah, that's a good follow-up, John. Yes, we will. Iris may have went into this some yesterday, but just to make sure that it was covered, if we are making an offer on a tract of land that has, let's just say, the subsurface interest, we will have done an assessment and an analysis of that ownership interest to see if there's economically viable value there. So folks should understand that if they're getting an offer, it does reflect an actual look at the value of the minerals. And so we're not asking basically to purchase those for nothing. We've done the analysis.
Great. Well, if there's no more questions, and I'd back to Majel or John Barry or anybody else if you have any more questions, but if not, I'd mostly like to really say thank you to John. I mean, it seems like we may want to do some follow-up in the future as the program develops more and you have more announcements ready to go. I think folks are really anxious to see this thing, up and running, and we'd be glad to do one of these with you as you get more of this program ready. We're also, John, you and I have talked at the NCAI annual meeting is coming up next week in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you and some of the folks from the buyback program are going to join us for a breakout session on land issues. Is that right, John?
Yeah, we're hoping to be out there, John. Like I started out with at the beginning, though, we do have shutdown
problems. Well,
problems. Yeah, and so we're monitoring those, and part of the problem is just getting travel arrangements, frankly, and so I'm hoping to make it out there, but I just can't guarantee it at this point. But we're definitely looking to do that. I found it useful when I was in Reno, and we definitely are interested in doing those going forward. It's just we have this small complication right now
with the government shutdown. Well, hopefully that will be resolved soon. The breakout session we're planning would take on 3 issues related to tribal lands. The first is we've asked Larry Roberts if he'd come and talk a little bit about the latest on land to trust regulations and the Patch Patch, and just general developments with land to trust acquisition. The second issue we're going to talk about is the Keep Siegel settlement, and there are some leftover funds. They have excess money to distribute, and how that process is going to work. And that's a fairly hot topic right now. And then thirdly, we want to spend a good bit of time just talking with folks about developments in this program. So that's what we're planning next week, Tuesday the 15th at 1:30 in the afternoon in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if there's nothing else, thanks so much to you, John, and to you, Debbie, and to John Barry and Majel and Clark. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.